Do you want to jump into topic 2 or just cut it there?
Yeah. No, let's do it.
Okay. Well, we're gonna want more time with this topic, but we can start into it and see how far we get. But it's um, so Garland's gonna love me for this, but
Okay.
I'm starting to come around on his line of thinking a little bit in some ways. Um, I don't think he's entirely good faith about like I think that you say that he wouldn't eat animals um, if he didn't think he needed it for nutrition.
Hmm.
I'm not entirely convinced of that.
Yeah.
But I think his point about the rodenticide in particular and like insecticide to a lesser degree is a really good one. And I think you sort of beat me a little bit to accepting this as a reasonable argument.
Hmm.
Um, I've always disliked it. I didn't actually know
Hmm.
about rodenticide until fairly recently, but I've always like disliked the idea of crop deaths and like the animals die. But I've rationalized it from a couple of things. Like I've thought it in terms of like the negative rights violation is how I ground most of like what I value. And so I didn't see like negative rights violations happening in crop deaths. And then with
Hmm.
rodenticide, I do see that as a negative rights violation. And so my instinct was, well, why is this okay? Why do I think it's okay? And so I started trying to defend it, which would like is kind of always your gut reaction when you're presented with something. Like you try to
Hmm.
like you have some permanence to your moral views. Like before you change your mind, you first like challenge an idea, which I think is fine as long as you don't keep thinking about it. But my
Hmm.
initial gut was like, how do I counter this? And so the way I tried to counter it um, is in terms of I think it's a moral, a negative rights violation to a lesser degree than like what we do in animal ag, and I still
Hmm.
believe that. I still believe that that's the case. But it's not an either or. This is the thing, and I
Hmm.
think I think you are I think you already are ahead of me on this. So,
Hmm.
and you've brought this idea of like excess calories up a few times, and I think that does apply in this situation.
Hmm.
So if you're a vegan and you have some way that you're vegan for certain reasons, right? So it's like maybe you think you're a utilitarian and you think that you also consider animals into your equation, so you don't want to kill animals because it drops the utility of animals, so that's why you're vegan. Or you're
Hmm.
like me, you value negative, like not wanting to infringe on like the negative rights of all animals, including humans, and so you think that veganism is the best way to do that. So yeah, it might be the best way. It might be the best diet. That still might be the case. But, but, big but,
Big butt.
it's not just for survival. Because like, if I have vegan ice cream or something, like that's not to survive.
Yeah.
And so and um, or there might be many things. Like maybe I want to be better at sports. It's like if there's a negative rights violation entailed by crop agriculture and it's morally relevant in the same way that like even to a lesser extent, but in the same way that like animal ag is a negative rights violation, then I can only justify that it's okay because it's for survival, it's for our food. I can only justify that to the extent where I'm only partaking to the extent that I need to survive. Any additional that I partake in, that justification doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah.
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 So
No, I definitely agree. Yeah, it's complicated because it's not as simple as we can know exactly how much to eat and then stop. So I don't think it matters if somebody eats 2,000 calories and then they also eat an extra apple. That in that sense it doesn't matter. But yeah, I would say it starts mattering once somebody gets like very overweight, when they realize that they're eating based on addiction. Um, and yeah, I think especially something like vegan ice cream, you'd have to see enough studies that would show that this processed food is causing benefits to your health to be able to justify it. And I don't
Right.
think I think Alex said something to Peter Singer about he realized that like if he maybe is buying a coffee and he could have sent that $5 to
Hmm.
yeah, and so we
Slave
can't
consequentialism, essentially.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we can't change everything in our lives to make everything better, but our own specific actions when we purchase something and we know the outcomes, I don't know what the level is, but I think we should constantly be working towards getting better at that. And I watched a conversation my buddy Has Vegan had with another friend, Akash, and he was saying if restaurants, how they have like a listing of calories next to their food, if you're at a vegan restaurant, it was all plant based, and you got this like brownie, and there was it listed like how many insects and birds and rodents died in crop deaths, and then you were going to decide if you're going to put a scoop of ice cream on top of that brownie, and that one said how many. I can't remember exactly why it matters if you add the scoop of ice cream or not, because you probably shouldn't be doing either of those two things. Um, but yeah.
Well, I mean, if there's no harm caused, I think it's totally fine. I think I
Mm-hmm.
would advocate for freedom of do whatever. I don't think it's wrong to like be unhealthy or something if you want to be, or to like take risks with your life, like go bungee jumping because there's a 0.001% chance that the cord snaps and you die. So you shouldn't be able to do it because it increases the chance of you dying. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't like any of those things, but if it's where the rights violation comes in on other things where it starts being relevant to me. And like I'm still not sold on the accidental deaths being counted in the same way. At least I think that we can still
Like a tractor running over a mouse, you mean? Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah,
Oh,
I think
completely.
that I still care about like general suffering and everything, but it's
Mm-hmm.
much smaller, um, like category, I guess, than like my direct cause on negative rights violations.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what I'm lacking in this whole thing is like the empirics of it. I don't know,
Yeah.
like people like Garland who talk about this all the time. You see videos and you see whatever. I'm trying to like reach out to a few people in that are sort of like anti-rodenticide people to see if I can set up some talks with them to learn like what they have to say,
Mm-hmm.
to learn like the scale of this issue. It's like if I have an extra helping of broccoli, how many deaths is that? Like how
Right.
much negative rights violation is that causing? I have zero idea. I went on
Mm-hmm.
Garland's live stream the other night, and he asked me to guess how many um, animals I was responsible for killing each year, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I don't know. I'm like 1,000. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And but I would, if I knew that and I knew what I think that's the main symmetry breaker for me right now, at least.
Mm-hmm.
There's that and like the magnitude of um the like the weight that I would apply to the negative rights violation, like the
Mm-hmm.
severity of it. But if I
Yeah.
knew that like every extra half pound of broccoli, that's an extra rat that was intentionally poisoned by your
Yeah.
creating that demand, that would I think that I would have a moral obligation to
Yeah.
be
Well,
more
and
careful about the calories I consume and choose the vegan
mhm.
foods or whatever that cause less harm and death and everything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And you could like even look at something like putting poison in your house to kill rats in your house is if you were doing it because they're chewing up the foundation and your survival depends on your shelter, that's one thing. If you're doing it because you hate the noise they make, and let's say the noise they make is only during the daytime, so they're
Mm-hmm.
not messing with your sleep, then then you don't. It's not justified, or at least I would call it not justified, because you don't have, as a human, you don't necessarily have a right to not hear natural noises. I don't know what to do in that case. But a friend of mine that I'm going to have a debate with on this topic, actually, who's a fellow vegan, he defended the rodenticide thing by saying that he's not the farmer, he's not choosing to do it, so that's the
Yeah.
farmer's fault, not the vegans. And I tried to explain to him, there's no difference if you are purchasing it, knowing what happens, you're putting it in demand, you're paying for the action to happen. It's no
Totally.
different than paying to have an animal killed.
Yeah.
Aside from that, animal agriculture is probably way worse than the crop deaths, but it's still something that must be factored in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you got to hop
There's
off here. But
there's the
go
well,
ahead.
one more just like counterpoint to this that I'll address is the
Mm-hmm.
like the protecting one. I've heard like Lifton Vegan Logic had a video in response to Garland Farms that went through sort of his take on it. And one of the things I think he brought up was like if there was a bunch of like, you know, tiny humans even that were getting in the way of our food supply or something, and there was no way to reason with them or whatever, or practically deal with them other than killing them, then I would kill the tiny humans. And it's like, okay, great, but would you kill them beyond the magnitude that it took to in order to survive, like eat what you needed to survive? Like there's like
Mm-hmm.
that's like the big difference between your food
Not
supply.
just that though. Would you do that, but also would you kill all the tiny humans if it meant there was more suffering and death than if you had a different food supply that would be, say, animals? And this is only assuming that animal product hypothetical where animal products are healthy. If it caused 10 times or 100 times the amount of suffering and death to kill these tiny humans than it would be to kill some pigs and cows and eat them, then I would say the moral obligation, if the health was there, would be to eat the pigs and cows. The health isn't there, so it's just a pointless hypothetical. But yeah, I think that part matters.
Yeah, I would have a similar but slightly different answer on that, because it for me would come down to the negative rights violations, not just the suffering and death, and I would weight those negative rights violations based
Mm,
on how much I dislike them. Like I think killing is worse than like poking or whatever.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then there's a differential in how much I value certain species as well based on
Okay.
sentience. Like,
How about this then?
but
Okay, so I'll just go real quick. So if you put out rodenticide that I'm assuming rats smell it and they like the smell of it and they eat it and then they fall over dead.
mhm.
And then let's say they figure out how to make something identical to that, but for deer. And instead of hunting now with a gun, hunters go out and they set this thing out that deers like. The deer goes up, licks it, falls over dead. Is one of those a rights violation and the other's not? Or is it because you're putting it out there for one to consume it, where the other one you're putting it out there to kill it to protect something else? They feel like the same rights violation to me.
Mm, no, I don't see that as the same rights violation. If I need the food to live,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that as the same rights violation. Like if there was an alternative, like I don't know what other vegan food I can buy that doesn't have the rodenticide or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that maybe that analogy would hold there. If it's like buy this broccoli A where the rodenticide was applied and broccoli B where the rodenticide wasn't applied,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that would hold. But like,
Well,
yeah,
hold
go
on.
ahead.
Let me challenge you real quick. So,
Yeah,
what if it wasn't for the food? You go to one forest and you put out rodenticide. A rat eats it, falls over. One
yeah.
forest you
Oh,
put
sorry. Oh, is that what you
deericide.
said? Okay, yeah. No, the same thing.
So okay, and so it's not for the food. So you're saying the fact that the reasoning to put it out there is to save the food changes the rights violation?
Yeah,
In
of
my mind,
course.
the rights violation is still the same, but one's acceptable. It's kind of like the moral thing. It's immoral
Well,
to kill something, to kill a human, but if you kill him in self-defense, it's acceptable. I would say this is a rights violation because there's two animals in nature not doing anything wrong. You put poison out intentionally to kill both of them. The rights violation happened, but one maybe is justified or acceptable rights violation.
I think either way of thinking about that will get to the same answer in most scenarios. Uh, I
Okay.
I don't view it that way. But I could just as easily, and I think I would answer most questions the same way. Like,
Okay.
do you think it matters?
I think it matters for like if it's acceptable or not. Like I don't want to harm any animal, but I have like I've had
I mean, like,
situations where I
if
had
we
to
both
kill
have
mice in the house.
we both have like some function that's like our moral system that we plug a
Mm-hmm.
situation into and it outputs like the correct answer. So for yours, it's like,
Mm.
okay, well, there's some, negative rights violations like that equate to 0.8, and then there's some justifications that equate to 1.2. So the justification outweighs the negative, so it's 0.4 is the outcome. So I do the action, and then on mine, I'm just like, no, it's actually not a negative rights violation. It's killing someone in defense or whatever I said. Yeah, it's just a plus 0.4. So they both output the same answer, even though the function
Yeah.
is different. That's kind of what I mean. It's like,
Okay. Yeah, no, no,
yeah,
that's a good point. I think we feel the same. Yeah, it's just like having a different definition for a word.
yeah,
I guess I just like to view the idea of a negative right like let me be, let me, don't harm me. And I guess I just view it, if that happens, if that action, the thing we're calling a negative right happens, then it's still a negative right, even if you did it for good reason. So yeah, we're just wording it different. You should switch over to how I word
I'll think about it.
it.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I want to go into this more on another stream. And if anyone watches this that like disagrees with this perspective, I'd love
Hmm.
to, like, if anyone even wants to come in and discuss it or something,
Yeah.
I'd be down for that.
Yeah.
So
Let's set that
it's
up and get a third in there. I think the problem is it's the same thing as meat eaters. They when they hear about veganism, they don't want to think of themselves as bad, so they try to fight it off. Vegans are the same way. We're doing what we think is a good thing, but we don't want to think of ourselves as bad. So you hear something like crop dust, you go, "Oh, it's dumb," ignore it, and that's just how most humans are. That's how we're designed. So I think it would be worth getting fellow vegans to discuss it, because it's no matter what, even in a vegan world, a vegan as in not killing animals to eat them, we're still going to want to work for better and better and better. So that vegan world will include innovations that prevent crop deaths.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
I would hope so, at least as well. Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Cool,
I
man.
guess
Oh,
the question that it would be to anyone who is interested in discussing this would be something like, um, I guess they could either do this as an internal critique based on your or my view of why we're vegan, or they could just present their own view and we could critique it in either
mm.
case. And it would be, the question is something like, um, is intentional crop deaths, let's call it, or intentional deaths from crop protection, um, what's the word? Acceptable under
Oh,
veganism.
you're cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, is intentional crop deaths acceptable under
Hmm.
veganism, or is it consistent with veganism?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good conversation to have with many different people. So, yeah, let's set that up. All right, man.
Cool.
Well, you have a good one. I'll see you later.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
Ciao.
Bye.